about the legislation, we followed those to the T. And every time the legislature takes me to court, we find out that is so. So they feel that we're infringing, but no, we're just following the laws that were created prior to me. So for example, the late Chairman Van created the 0409, which the legislature gave that authority up to the chairman. So since then, it's been operating that way. And so if they want to change it, they can, but at the time when they took Black Eagle to court, that's what the tribal court also upheld. And so until we change those laws, that's just the way it is. So I advise people to research that, look that up, because it's easy to say everyone's breaking laws, but I tell you what, the Constitution says legislature shall be paid quarterly, every 2 weeks, but we're paying a whole year's salary. So who's breaking the law? Who's breaking the Constitution? So meanwhile, they'll come up with all kinds of fancy answers, but my point here is that the Constitution does have flaws, but what was the intent? And our job to be that servant, our job to enforce things is there. So that's what we do. And people may not like it, because when we fire someone for poor performance, legislature gets involved. Now, am I overreaching by allowing them to come in? No, I don't believe I am. But they do not work for the executive branch, but yet, where is the separation of powers? Talk about judicial. When it comes to judicial and the funding is there, the previous judge that was removed by the legislature, but they're blaming the chairman or the executive office for that removal. But if you read the law, the due process is the legislature. So yeah, there does need to be some separation of powers, but overall, what is the intent? And the tribe has priorities. We're not in the game to remove people. We're in the game to help the communities. And when these people can't do the job, we need to remove them and put qualified people there.
Building off of that same question, would you be supportive of a movement to reform the 2001 Crow Tribal Constitution? And how would you support such a movement?
That's a very great question. I would be very supportive. There's so much business that needs to be conducted in the executive, far more bigger than finances. It's protecting sovereignty, our hunting right, treaty right, all the other issues that are coming to the tribe. So even though financing is a major problem right now, if we had financial experts such as CPAs and a whole plethora of accountants, because it's big business, the way we've operated is a four-man crew in finance with IT who work the softwares. The difficulty we've seen in that's why there was no transparency. But until the tribe can generate the right revenue to pay for those types of services, we're kind of in the muck that we're in. No excuses here, but that's the plan going forward, is to make sure we identify good legal, good finance, and then good directors so they can maintain compliance, just like the college does.
Senator Wycliffe?
Yes, like we said, our platform is on reform, constitutional reform, strengthening all three branches to where they benefit the Crow people. And the bigger picture across the board is that a change needed. As Crows, historically, we adapted and overcame every obstacle that was brought to us. All of these things, and we've kind of went stagnant on this in the last 19 years. Yeah, the Constitution was a change, but we stopped changing after that. And we need to adapt and look at all these areas that it does need cleanup in. We need all these areas, and looking at the picture of where it benefits the Crow people across the board, and where it's fair and where it's legal, and getting all of these little, like 0405, all these laws that were made after that, but also codifying these amendments like the Ben Cloud Clause, where these different sections where you have to be compliant within your programs, and like that nullifies that. There's different things, and they're all over the place. So getting a huge cleanup across the board in our Constitution, and looking at these areas where it is flawed and where we can make it better, and including the Crow people on these decisions through the districts or through referendum. But there is a need for change, and there is a need for reform. And through this Constitution, where there's a lot of gray areas, where the old Constitution brought its, there was ideas from the old Constitution that were brought into this new one, and we need to address those and evolve and adapt and have a constitutional reform, not just once every 20 years. Have it where we utilize it maybe every 5 years. This ain't working, let's go back to the drawing board and let's fix this. The state does it, they do it all the time, and these different governments. We can make this to where it benefits, and we're able to use it and adapt and continue adapting to where the Crow people benefit, and we can go across the board and find all these flaws and issues and fix them to where the Crow people are the benefits of this. Thank you.
Senator Whiteley, can you speak to other revenue streams that could be improved for financial stability? In particular, there were several that were mentioned, maybe with natural resources, the buffalo herd, land, water, timber, and minerals.
Yes, thank you. There's a lot of different ways to bring in different revenue streams across the board. We heard from some of them tonight, as like hemp. We heard from coal. We've been kind of coddled in coal for the last 40 years. We had a coal mine that generated a revenue, and right now, not so much, but coal is always there, and there's different technologies that come from it, and that we can utilize these different technologies. And for coal, biomass, there's the hemp we can produce. We have the best farming available to us. We put in the best place on earth to utilize our natural resources. Our natural resources are abundant, and there's no way we should be in the situation we are in today. We need to diversify, get across the board. Right now, in the Crow Reservation, 107 million comes in the agriculture products that leave the Crow Reservation. The Crow people, the tribe included, benefit 10% of that. So that means 97 million agriculture products sold is leaving the reservation and not in Crow pockets. So utilizing our land base for farming, be it hemp or other cash crops that are there, and utilizing our natural resources, our natural gas, our hydrogens coming up, and utilizing our energy resources on a diversified level to where we make a portfolio across the board and come up with a strategic energy plan and portfolio and putting it through there to where the revenue streams come through, and utilizing our own local people for this, be it in the private sector or bringing in educated Crow people to help the government in this process, but also utilizing Solid Inc., where we separate the business and politics, to where government can't run business and the business can't run a government. The government is for a service to the people and the business is for profit. So separating that there and putting all our for-profit businesses and using our resources for economic development to benefit our Crow people is where we can bring in more revenue streams and diversified revenue streams, thinking outside of the box and bringing in these technologies and these people that are educated to get these things going to benefit the Crow people. Thank you.
Chairman Oliver.
Okay, if you could repeat the question.
Absolutely. What other forms of revenue streams can be improved for financial stability? And in particular, could you speak to natural resources such as the buffalo herd, land, water, timber, and minerals?
Sure, I'll start with the buffalo. First of all, when I worked on the Standing Rock Reservation, there was an individual there that is enrolled up in the 3 affiliated of Fort Berthold. And how he capitalized on buffalo sales was, first of all, by bringing in a hunter. That was one source. Second source was the plasma of the buffalo sent overseas. And the third source was the leather products produced by the hides and such. And then the cultural activities that are produced from that harvest, And then the last thing, the education part. These are revenue streams for the tribe to work on behalf. One individual said during the time, Oct administration, he said that buffalo are sacred, therefore they'll continue to take care of us. So I look at that in the light of, in the 1800s, everything they provided then, from shelter to food sources and such, today that can be utilized in a revenue, with a revenue technique. So understanding how those cuts, or certain meats are a delicacy out there, the Crow tribe could engage in that. But that would require kind of a separate entity again, because again, if we continue to run the Crow tribe, both legislative, executive, and judicial, as individual commercial businesses, that ain't going to work, because you're getting politicians in these avenues that don't understand how to run things commercially. So therefore, when we separate that, like he just stated where Absolica Inc. is one of the keys. Well, the sad thing is there's more infrastructure that is needed to be built around that Absolica Inc. That lacks various codes and so forth, but when we entertain those through different discussions, we could see how we can catapult the revenues. Now that's buffalo. Switching from buffalo to natural resources, millions and millions of dollars leave the reservation, like he just stated. And how to capture that? Well, the first thing is we all need to get off our butt and work. The second thing is Crows have the ability on bidding on these tracts. They could take off with it. If the Crow tribe wants to venture in operating like we do with the cattle, it does need that third-party entity. Because again, if your tribal government, like look at the United States, does the United States run business? No. And if we plagiarized our Constitution after that, that's why your economic department kind of lacks that. So with all these new or improved ways of doing things and working with the legislature, I believe that these would create a larger return. Also, capitalizing on renewable and other non-renewables, diversification, those would also help subsidize the Crow people if the nation ever went into a larger disadvantage like they did in the 20s. The Crow tribe could self-sustain itself by creating its own field, its own food source. Again, with creating these plants, house development, so forth. All those can be underway.
Okay, Chairman, not afraid. How do you plan to address economic conditions of the Crow people? In particular, there are three areas that were pointed out: employment, small businesses, and farmers and ranchers.
Okay, just making a note for myself. First of all, ranchers have the biggest opportunity. During my tenure as chairman, we worked with the cattle operation, and we sold cattle with the Crow Livestock Association, sold to individual Crow members so they could be new beginners. And I believe at the time we had 9 approved applicants. So that's good news. Now that's one less family knocking on the tribe's door for employment. And there's over 2.2 million acres out there, and operator-wise, we're lucky to be using 300,000 acres of that, meaning membership. So someone else is obviously using the resource. The second thing, employment. The Crow tribe, through various entities, whether it be Walmart or these big distribution companies, even Amazon, we're actually in the talks today with Amazon on seeing if they could bring in a factory for a distribution place, only because metropolitan-wise, we're X amount of miles from Minneapolis, X amount of miles from Seattle or Spokane, and X amount of miles from Denver. So we're like a focal point that they can easily take advantage of. Also with the taxation, because being an Indian country, that's why they've given, like the Trump administration said, Indian country is the new China. Not talking about salaries, talking about jobs. Take those jobs away from China, put them in Indian country, because Indian country needs those jobs. So we're in line with those ideas and also those plans. So hopefully within the next 2 weeks, we could broadcast that plan to the legislature, because we would encumber tribal lands to develop those warehouses for jobs. And then small business, as you all know, that's what makes the world turn here. The more small business we create and we downsize the tribal government can just work on a fee or a taxation, if you will, on that small business. And that's how it would revolve, because the tribe needs to produce, or our tribe needs to make sure there's a service out for that fee or that taxation for that small business, such as emergency, like law enforcement, medical, road maintenance. All these things all work and collaborate together just like they do off reservation. So if we implement those, then you'll see the Crow start to sustain itself rather than just waiting on wholesale. And as coal's declining, what are we doing? So that's the plan going forward. And I tell you what, there's a lot of good stuff coming through the pipes that is going to improve people's thought process as well as having the hope for a better future.
Whiteley?
Can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. How do you plan to address the economic conditions Crow people live in particular with employment, small businesses, and farmers and ranchers?
With employment, we need more small businesses out there. We need more bigger business. We need businesses out here across the board, but we need a strong court system to implement business, because what happens with businesses that come in is that they want to take their arbitration outside of our court system. They want to take all these issues outside of our court system, seeing that that tells us that we have an incompetent court system. And if we strengthen our court system to where we can have more business-friendly, jurisdictional court system, then we can bring in these bigger businesses to come in and use these different entities to employ the Crow people, so that way we have long-term jobs, not just every 4 years, and then we do away with the whole deal, and then election time we come into a hiring frenzy and go back the same way. And right now with the COVID funds, there's small business allocations for that. I believe the budget that was presented from the Crow tribe showed that there was $500,000 available for small businesses, and if that's utilized, I do not know. But utilizing our highways, like Chairman Notafrate said, and utilizing our land and taxation to where we have a more business-friendly model, to where we can get these long-term businesses here to sustain jobs and employment for our people, so that way they're not relying on the government and the Crow tribe for employment, but they have retirement, they have a good paycheck, and they have insurance that comes with these other business entities, where the Crow tribe is a government service entity where it's not for business. But we don't have to make $1 million on every deal, and Crow tribe doesn't have to benefit in that way, but as long as we have these jobs for our people and improve the lives of them around here, then that's a win. As far as ranching, the operators go, creating a more preference land committee, a more preference land and lease law, to where Crow ranchers and operators have a better step up, and that they can get their preferences in and utilize Crow lands for Crow people, and giving them a more fair base as far as the leases that come out. There's a lot of idle lands that are out there that haven't been utilized, and giving local operators, or soon-to-be operators, people starting out, a better chance at getting these leases.
Senator Whiteley, could you speak to how you might deal with some issues with the Crow people in the well-being of children and elders, in particular with the senior care center, foster care, or providing activities for those particular groups?
Thank you. That's someplace that's close to me is with the children right now. We have a lot of kids and no activities for them. We need to integrate our culture and bring those activities to the kids, and utilizing our elders to pass on their stories and the culture to these kids. And one thing that our slate wanted to utilize was our youth camp, and utilize the youth camp with the college in mind, and bringing out these cultural activities, bringing the elders in to teach these ways that are being lost every day, and utilizing those and having this youth program so that way we can pass the culture on, the stories and everything that's being lost, we can use it in that fashion. And as far as like the senior citizens center, I believe under the housing right now, they achieved a grant. They were awarded a grant and they're looking into rebuilding that, but also partnering, bringing the language immersion back into this area and utilizing the elders with the children in these senior centers and with these classes to where we pass on our culture and it's not being lost a generation, 2 generations down, and all of these beautiful things that make us Crow, that we're able to use these things in that way to educate our children, keep them busy, and also bring out the better, having a better stand on culture. And if you know where you are, you'll never get lost. You know where you come from. So with that, with the elders, I'd like to see the elder senior citizens open. I'd like to see the kids, the language immersion, working with the elders to bring these programs back and making these programs available across all the communities and teaching our children the things that aren't being taught in school. We heard about all these other tribes in our local schools, but our Crow culture isn't being taught in these schools. And working with the state on that level to see if we can utilize that to educate not only just the reservation schools, but schools across the state on Crow culture. Thank you.
Yes, if you could repeat the question.
Absolutely. How will you address some of the issues that are concerning to Crow people, in particular with the well-being of children and elders? So they mention senior care center, foster care, and activities.
Yes, I'll start with the immersion in Head Start. First of all, the immersion program has continued. The Chickadee Lodge have contracted that through the tribe, again, creating entrepreneurship by the tribe being a pass-through. And we're working with Chickadee Lodge. What that does is it deploys employment, and like, for example, today, you have an election coming up. They don't have to worry about employment. They don't have to worry about the political components. So again, little by little, we're able to release these programs by finding the right Crow people and administering and taking care of those programs. That leads us to Head Start. We engaged with the Little Bighorn College to have them assume that role. The 5-year contract was up this past summer, and we found so many flaws from 2014 to 2019. So the difficulty in possessing that program puts us in that same predicament of disallowed costs, question costs, even payback. So that puts us in a very hard predicament in moving the program forward. The initial plan was to work with Lodgegrass School. That would come to us by planning of the CEO's office, the executive CEO. And I thought, well, it would be wise if the college took it, only because the institution is our professionals in education. So therefore they would know, again, kicking it off to an entity that would administer and run it. We also asked Chickadee Lodge to run Head Start my very first year in office, and they declined that. I understand that it was overwhelming because it's a $2 million program a year in 5-year increments. Moving from there to ICWA, the courts, we've been very diligent in working, and also some changeover in that sector. Lack of qualifications, lack of resources. Again, tribe not being able to front the cost to keep our social service directors fronted, which put a hardship on the children out there. Again, the court itself too needed some more improvements to help administer and or expedite for the welfare of the children. So that's ongoing, and that requires legislation. And then moving to the other component, MMIP, MMIW, that's huge of the well-being of our women, our Crow women, and men, because we can't forget those men that are lost as well, or stolen. We prioritize that through the law enforcement. We're seeing a lot more people enjoy coming out of their houses now in the communities. We also recognize that you cannot build business if there are no law enforcement, because every time we build something, it gets burnt down. And to have the community responsible, or the individuals responsible for that, we need good law enforcement. BI, on the other hand, had failed us because that's not a priority. A priority for them may be a disturbance or domestic violence somewhere. So when we're having this vandalism go across the board, it puts puts the tribe in a difficult position.
Chairman Not Afraid, we'll start with you. There's a number of programs that maybe you could just speak to. 5 in particular: the Water Compact, Head Start, which you just mentioned, AML, daycare, and language preservation.
Could I get the names of those again?
Absolutely. Water Compact, Head Start, AML, daycare, and language preservation.
All right, thank you. I'll start with AML. AML has probably been the most successful program we've had since its existence. And that's why we decided to use that model, because that model was identical to the college. So the college was the first thing during, at the time, I believe David Stewart was instrumental on creating the college through the board system. So as we evaluated that, we've seen where the college is. That's a success story. So using that same one, what other programs out there are success stories? AML in particular is one. They had their own finance, they had their own hiring process. They didn't have compliance issues. And in 2012, the tribe took over those services, and then it started to deplete its funds, couldn't locate its funds, and then next thing you know, we have back pays clear up until just even recent. So going back to the basics of how those entities ran, we're hoping to pursue that and allow them to maintain and run these programs so they can be successful and have incremental increases because of good stewardship. Now with daycare is another one that we had several directors in there who had improved the program from a $500,000 budget to now a $2 million budget. So there's a lot of good going on there. The difficulty today is COVID shuts the doors because staff, contract providers who watch over kids are getting sick, and then it just ends up not working for everybody. Then with Head Start, as I said earlier, Head Start today would be given over to the college, which I believe had applied for, and Senator Tester, Senator Daines, as well as Congressman Gianforte support the tribe in that maneuver. We have Language Prez, which I talked about earlier. Chippewa Lodge, which is a private entity, had taken that over. So the more we can have entrepreneurship or small business take these over, I believe they'll be more successful and they're not subject to the politics. And they can create the benefits and other things needed to sustain good people. The tribe right now with the pay scales, we're working with 20-year-old pay scales, and how do you plan to retain experts at those wages? Thank you.
Senator Whiteley, shall I repeat those?
Yes, please.
Okay. Water Compact, Head Start, AML, daycare, and language preservation.
Okay, with AML, getting out there, that's a program that they're going beyond their scope, and they're doing an amazing job with everything that comes through because they're the workforce of the tribe. A lot of times that when the elders meet wood, AML is out there doing that, getting these things out. When people get in trouble with getting stuck out there, a lot of times it's AML workers that come out and help them out, and all these things that come across it. This is a great program, and it's an employment source. And trying to talk with the national level, getting AML more financing, going through and talking to OSM when my time as IT is trying to get upgrade their technology, upgrade their mapping software to where we can utilize them for more services that's across the board. And a lot of young men start out there and learn different things, that there's a wide range of uses that they encounter in AML, setting up the different buildings going through, and they utilize them a lot, and they use their programs a lot, and they're right now they cleaned up the trash up here at many different times, and putting more people there to where they have, it's not after the 4 years they're not fired across the board, because a lot of people in the tribe are hard-working people. They're just trying to make do and make a livelihood, but every 4 years is where we have a problem with everybody down the line getting fired and reapplying for the jobs or coming through, and we need to stop that. And with water compact is re-engaging with BOR and getting these projects out there, because there is a lot of heavy equipment operators. Like we said before, the coal mine is vamping down, so we have a huge amount of heavy equipment operators, truck drivers, and all these other tradesmen that can come out here and do these projects. Putting our co-people to work on these different projects is where we need to be. And like with Head Start, like the tribe is planning now to engage with the college on that. I mean, I'm not opposed to a plan like that, because it's a good plan. If we can't do the job, maybe the college can do it and administer that project. And with the daycare, a lot of people want to work, but daycare is a huge issue. And having these available for the low income to be able to come and get a good daycare, and having these services available for the low income, that when they're able to get these jobs and not worry about their kids.
I'm sorry, I didn't get to address the compact, or is that over?
Actually, we can go back to that, because there is another question about water compact. So since we're with Senator Whiteclay, we'll allow him to respond first. What about the water compact funds? Can you speak to us about that and water compact in general?
The water compact in general is a huge undertaking. Getting